Welcome back, True Crime Army. I am your host, Margot, and this is Military Murder, the show where we discuss crimes involving military members and veterans, always with one goal in mind: to remind you to remain vigilant always. And above all, if you see something, say something. Today, we're talking about the case that put military crime in the national spotlight, the tragic story of Army Specialist Vanessa Guillén. And I'm honored to be joined by one of America's most respected journalists, John Quiñones. For over 40 years, John has reported for ABC News on 2020, Nightline, and World News Tonight. He's also the creator and host of the hit show, What Would You Do?, where real people are tested in moments of moral challenge. From first in his family to graduate from college to Emmy Award-winning journalist, he's bringing the same passion for truth and justice to a powerful new podcast on Vanessa Guillén's life and legacy. The podcast is called Vanished: What Happened to Vanessa? John, welcome to Military Murder. How are you?
Good, Margot. Thank you for having me.
I'm honored to have you. And by the way, later I'm going to pinch myself just to make sure that this was real. I had to make sure that I pressed record because, sometimes you just have this amazing opportunity and you're like, I didn't even record anything.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to be with you, and thank you for your service. Really.
Thank you. Thank you. So I know that you have basically been involved in Vanessa's case and telling the story to America and to the world, basically. So I want you to tell us about Vanished: What Happened to Vanessa? What inspired you to focus on her story now? Now, I do know that you've done the story before, but why now?
It's a story that was very special to me. First of all, we did two 2020 documentaries on it when it first happened. And then so much has happened since then. So there's information that we'll be able to tell in these 6 podcasts that the public had really not heard before. And it's a story that's really and continues to be really special to me and very close to my heart because the tragedy happened just a couple of hours from the town in which I was born and raised in San Antonio. It happened on a military base at Fort Hood on the morning of April 22nd, 2020. A 20-year-old Mexican American soldier, just like my family, Mexican American. This soldier, Private First Class Vanessa Guillén, simply disappears while working in that arms room, and she disappears, on base within the confines of the gates of Fort Hood. Baffling. Uh, that morning at around 9 a.m. on April 22nd, Vanessa texted her boyfriend, who later was by then her fiance. His name is Juan Cruz, and she texted him back in their hometown of Houston, where she was born. And all she sent was a very short message saying, I have to work in a few minutes. And that was the last text that Vanessa ever sent to the family. She then was missing for weeks upon weeks, her family pleading, demanding answers from military officials, asking how could this happen within the confines of a military base in America. The Guillen family then was getting no answers, they felt. You know, the authorities were doing what they could, but the family felt like they weren't doing enough. And they started organizing their own protests and their own marches with 3 of the women who were closest to Vanessa leading the charge. And it was her mother, of course, Gloria Guillen, and her older sister, Myra, and her little sister, Lupe. And the story just blows up on social media. I first heard about it because my nephew called me from San Antonio. I was in Dallas, and he said, have you heard about this? Have you seen what the actress Salma Hayek is posting? And on Instagram, she had posted a picture of Vanessa with the simple message, bring us back, Vanessa. And Salma kept posting, saying, I'm going to keep posting different pictures of Vanessa until she's found. So then, I started doing some research, and we wound up doing 2020 documentaries on it. And in my interviews with the family, they told me that shortly after she had been assigned to Fort Hood after serving time in South Carolina, they saw a real change in Vanessa. She seemed worried and she seemed depressed and she wasn't eating right. was losing weight. And then she confides in her mother, Gloria, that she was being sexually harassed by a sergeant at the base. The search continues then for more than 2 months. As you may recall, they didn't have any answers for 2 months. And finally, more than 2 months later, heartbreakingly, her remains are discovered. And after she was last seen, and her body was dismembered and burned and then buried in three makeshift grave sites about 30 miles from Fort Hood. But it
Hmm.
took so long to find her.
Definitely. And I remember, so I had just started my podcast about 6 months before Vanessa disappeared. And I
Mhm.
remember telling myself, I'm going to start the podcast and I'm not really going to cover current cases, just going to be more of like a warning, be careful. But man, when Vanessa's case hit the news, and I don't know if you went, I'm sure you went back and it's part of actually the podcast now. I remember watching Vanessa's mom just pleading in Spanish, and they didn't even have a translator. Like there was just a local newscast. Do you recall that? I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
Vanessa's case is so clear to me, but there was just a local newscast there. I don't even think they spoke Spanish, and they just put the mic in her face, and she's talking to them in Spanish. And I remember as a Latina thinking, why is no one translating what this woman is saying? Like,
Yeah.
how is this even fair? But then eventually, with just the mom's cries, what do you think sets the Guillen family apart from other families who have had a similar thing happen to them, but they were they intimidated by the military? Is that what sets the Guillen family apart?
Well, they could have been intimidated, and initially they tried really hard to go the formal way, the right way to do it. Her sister, as soon as Vanessa went missing, Myra drove 3 hours from Houston to the base,
Mhm.
got there late at night. She calls the people at the base, and they tell her, it's too late. We're sleeping. Call us in the morning. Come back in the morning. So they get a hotel room. It was Vanessa, her sister, and Vanessa's boyfriend, Juan Cruz. So
Mhm.
they come back the next morning. I think what kept this family going was just their die-hard determination not to give up and to keep seeking justice and keep asking questions. And in such a passionate way, it wasn't just Gloria in Spanish, which you didn't have to speak Spanish
Mhm.
to understand, right? You could tell. But the little sister, Lupita, who kept just saying, how could this happen on a military base? I want my sister and I want her back alive. I think that determination is what made them stand up. When Vanessa told her mother that she was being harassed, the mom, Gloria, said, well, tell me who it is, because I'm going to go into that base and I'm going to barge through those gates and I
Mhm.
will confront this person. And Vanessa had to calm her down and say, Mom, it's not like that. This is different. This is the military. It's not like civilian courts. So just calm down. I'll deal with it. But they could tell that she was not doing well. She was not eating right. She was really sad. And but the family that only egged the family on as they got the more of the days, the more this went on,
Mhm.
more determined they became, and they started putting up murals, as you might remember, murals, beautiful murals of. It just caught fire. It went viral on social media. Millions of people from all over the world with the hashtag I am Vanessa Guillen. And it just so resonated. Other people who had gone through similar things in the military started coming out of the woodwork. The
Mhm.
murals were not only all over Texas, but in Wichita, Kansas, and in Washington, D.C. The message was loud, and I think it forced the military to work harder at trying to find out what exactly happened.
So your podcast is 6 parts, right? I feel like a lot of listeners, when I was at CrimeCon recently, whenever anybody who came up to my booth, they may have not heard of Military Murder, the podcast before, but they were like, "Have you heard about the girl in Texas?" And I was like, "Of course I have," you know. But I feel like Vanessa's case is the one case that everyone knows of. It's infamous, I feel like. So many listeners might think like, oh, we kind of watched this play out on TV and maybe they've watched the 2020 documentaries and the I Am Vanessa Guillen documentary. How is the 6 part documentary or the podcast just a little bit different? Like how do you set it apart?
Well, I think we will hear things that we had never heard before from the family. We'll find out that a person was convicted in her murder as an accessory to the murder, As you may recall, the man who was eventually pointed at as the man who killed her
Mhm.
was Aaron Robinson, who was the last soldier to see her. They had worked together in that arms room, and he had initially told authorities that he had nothing to do with it, that he went home that night. But then the investigators start pinging uh, checking out his phone data on his cell phone and pinging. They noticed that the phone pinged in near the Leon River. So despite what he was saying that he was home, and he
Right.
kept calling his girlfriend with whom he was living. And by the way, she was married to another soldier, and that's illegal in the military, but that's almost a separate story right now. But her name is Cecily Aguilar, and that was his girlfriend, and he confided in her, but he had told authorities that he had been home with her all night. And
Mhm.
then they noticed that he had been calling her. So they asked him, why, if you're at home, why are you calling the woman you live with in the same house? And they came up with another answer. They said, well, Cecily said, I'd lost my phone, and he was calling it to find out where the phone was. But some of those conversations went on for minutes and minutes. Why would you keep talking on the phone? It turns out that the phone pinged a couple of times near the Leon River, which is 30 miles from the military base. And it pinged there a couple of times. So the authorities then start looking at him more closely, saying, why? What was he doing out there? What was his phone doing out there? And they sent out a search team. There was a man by the name of Tim Miller who still runs an organization called EquiSearch. And sometimes they even go out on horseback. It's a volunteer group. And he started it, Tim Miller did, because his own daughter went missing and turned up dead. So he sends his team out there, and other investigators are out there too, and they find the remains of someone in that area. It turns out it was another soldier. So initially, it was a false report that it might be. They thought it might be Vanessa. It wasn't. But a few days later, indeed, they find three small grave sites. One of them, the remains were very decomposed, but still had black hair. And they did DNA testing, and they finally determined that this was Vanessa. So that's how they found out. And they confront the suspect, Aaron Robinson, and while they're questioning him, he manages to run away from the room they were talking to him in. He should have been labeled as a high suspect, but he wasn't. Even though they were saying, watch him, we want to really closely watch him, he managed to run out of the off the base, drive away. He had a gun with him. He leaves his car somewhere. Meanwhile, his girlfriend, Cecily Aguilar, is now cooperating with authorities, and she's
Mm.
telling them everything. And she says to him, yes, I helped him dispose of the body. And not only that, I helped him dismember the body and bury it in different sites. That's when then Aaron Robinson ran away, got on foot, and pointed a gun at a police officer at first, and then he pointed the gun at himself, and he took his own life. The woman was finally, Cecily, even though she cooperated with authorities, she was convicted as an accessory to the crime and served 30 years in prison. So you will hear about that too.
Yeah.
What's happened to Cecily Aguilar? How is the family doing now? We interview Myra Guillen, the older sister, yet
Mhm.
again. She tells me that she's considering running for Congress, although she's putting it on hold. She's a mother of a new baby now. Her mother was sick for a while, Gloria Guillen, Vanessa's mother, but she's doing better now. As you might recall, the father, Rogelio, when
Mhm.
Vanessa disappeared, he had no idea that she was missing, but he started getting chest pains at the precise moment
Oh, wow.
I believe Vanessa died. And he sees that as an omen. It's a terrible omen of what it was now looking back of what had happened to his daughter.
So as I was listening to your podcast, as someone who's followed the case, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get some sort of closure. Like I'm gonna feel closure. Like I'm gonna feel like justice happened, and I kind of get this uneasy feeling like it doesn't matter how we tell the story that there will never be true justice. How does that resonate with you, having been embedded with the family and embedded in the story?
They'll never find out exactly what happened, right? Because the suspected killer took his own life. So they were the only two people in that room, Vanessa and Aaron Robinson. Because he took his own life, we never heard him tell his side of the story. All we know is from what his girlfriend has said. So you don't get a sense that there's justice. But you will also learn in these podcasts that at Cecily Aguilar's trial, where she pled guilty as an accessory, and again was sentenced to 30 years. At that trial, Vanessa's mother, Gloria, asked to meet with her privately and with the girlfriend, and Cecily agreed.
Oh, I haven't heard that yet.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
that is, oh, wow.
yeah, and they meet and they talk. And Cecily Aguilar, who had had a really rough life, tough upbringing, tells Gloria Guillen, "I wish I had had a mother like you.
Oh,
I wish I had had a mother like Vanessa had." Gloria Guillen. Gloria then forgives this woman who was convicted in her as an accessory to her daughter's murder. She says, "My religion allows me to forgive you and carry on and move forward." Maybe it's a deeply religious Catholic faith. As you know, she had an altar in her home. When I went to their home, they invited me in, and much of I think the reason I got such great access to them was because I'm also Mexican American, because I also grew up in the barrio in San Antonio. The house that they lived in Houston looked very much like the house that I grew up in. My mother did not speak English.
mhm.
Neither did my father. I didn't speak English till I was 6 years old. So when I first knocked on their door in Houston, Gloria opens the door, the mom, and immediately, invites me to lunch, and I could smell fresh tortillas being
Oh,
grilled. And then I look over in the living room, and there's an altar to the Virgin of Guadalupe, which is the
mm,
patron saint of Mexico, right? My mother had the same altar in our little house in the barrio in San Antonio, and it was adorned with pictures of Vanessa. And she would pray the rosary there every night and every morning for her daughter's return. Of course, she never was returned alive. But I think that gave me access to the family, the fact that I could connect with them, that I
yeah.
spoke Spanish with the mom. And much of my interview with her was in Spanish. I just we translated it.
Mhm.
That's the beauty, I think, of being able to speak that other language. And not only that, understanding the culture and knowing when to step back and stop asking questions, because the media was then trying really hard to get to the family. And the media can be awfully calloused sometimes. We descend upon these stories, and people are shooting through windows and banging on doors and thrusting microphones into these poor survivors, the families' faces.
Mhm.
I had the luxury of working for 2020, where it wasn't a story that had to be on that night. We didn't have that deadline. We
Right.
could take our time with it. Our stories are 2 hours long, these documentaries on 2020. So it allowed me to be able to say to them, look, if you don't want to talk to me right now, it's okay. We can talk tomorrow or the next day. Here's my cell phone. And that, I think, gave me a little bit more access to the family. And I became very close to them because they reminded me so much of my own family. I could
Mhm.
connect with them. And I'm glad we did it. And I'm glad we did it in the way we did. And the podcast has all that, and more. We learn how horribly Vanessa's body was abused after she was killed, to the point that her daughter, her sisters, didn't want to tell their mom, Gloria, all the details because they didn't want to hurt her. And finally, when she finally went to the gravesite, she was able to tell. She asked, "Why are there three different gravesites?" And they had to break it to her that Vanessa's body had been dismembered, and that Cecily claimed that she took part in the dismemberment and that there was necrophilia involved. It was just horrific the way it all turned out. But it's amazing to me. Again, the beauty is that this woman, this Mexican American woman who's deeply religious in Houston, Texas, decided that it was time that she that she forgave that the woman who was convicted in her daughter's murder as at least an accessory to it.
Right. I'm going to be watching for that episode, but
Mm.
it's truly well, I guess we can talk about higher beings or anything like that any day. I'm Latina as well. I'm Puerto Rican and Colombian, but what's interesting about Vanessa's case and about your connection to the case and what's drawing me in right this moment even is
Yeah.
that I was on active duty when Vanessa was murdered. And I remember never really thinking about being a Latina in the military. I was just in the military. You know what I mean? But when Vanessa's case made national headlines, it literally caused me to come face to face with the reality that I am a Latina in the military. And I literally remember sitting there one day and I remember crying whenever Gloria was on there, I was always crying, 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 crying. And I remember thinking like, if I went missing, would anyone look for me? Like, would anyone in the military look for me? You know what I mean? Like, or would they just continue the day, right? Because that's what the military does is something happens and you just continue on with your day. You can't stop. And
Yeah.
it really brought me face to face with that. I mean, it seems like you've encountered that, but in your interviews, not only with the family, but maybe with other military members, have you experienced or have you heard about anything like that?
What struck me is that as we started to dig into what Fort Hood's climate was like, we discovered that there had been multiple scandals at this base and
Mhm.
multiple allegations of sexual harassment and sexual misconduct. In 2015, a Fort Hood sergeant who served as a sexual harassment and assault advocate, right? He was supposed to be an advocate for victims, was convicted of running a prostitution ring. We learned that there were questions about the alarming number of soldier deaths at Fort Hood, including death by suicide. In 2020, the year Vanessa went missing, 13 Fort Hood soldiers reportedly died by suicide. This included the case of Elder Fernandez, who killed himself after reporting sexual abuse
Mhm.
to his command. The Army later said that it could not substantiate his allegations. But in the 4 years before Vanessa's disappearance, more Fort Hood soldiers died in homicides than in battle. And in 2020, the year Vanessa went missing, there were at least 28 Fort Hood soldiers who died, vanished, or in one case, turned up dead after going missing. So there was a real problem on this base. And that's when we took it all the way to the Pentagon to try to get answers from the Secretary of the Army,
Oh
Ryan.
my goodness. What a good lead into my next question. Oh my gosh, are you reading my notes? So okay, and now we're zoned in, right? For your reporting, you spoke with Ryan McCarthy, who's the former Secretary of the Army.
Yeah.
What was that like, or more broadly, how does or did the military respond to your reporting specifically about this case, but then when you were poking and prodding about all these other issues that you uncovered?
Yeah, we fully expected not to be received with open arms, certainly. And that's the tough thing about as a reporter for, the national media who's not in the military. How do you get inside the base? It's locked up, heavy security. They don't want to talk to you, then they won't. But to their credit, the Secretary of the Army and his team were very open. They agreed to meet with me at the Pentagon, and they knew it was going to be a tough interview, and they were very open about it. And then they were. He expressed shock. He said there are real problems. He admitted that there were real problems at Fort Hood, and he came down to the base, and there was a shakeup in the command of the base. And since the Vanessa Guillén case, the military has undergone some significant reforms, as you must know. Uh,
Mhm.
Most notably, with this act that was passed, the I Am Vanessa Guillén Act. It was signed into law a year after she disappeared in 2021 under the Biden administration. And the act, for the first time, criminalized sexual harassment, and it moved the prosecution of these cases of sexual harassment and assault, and it moved them outside of the military's chain of command. So now it requires an independent team of investigators to look at these cases, a civilian team. So it's not within the military anymore to consider these cases. And it also provided, the new act, it provided protections against retaliation. As you know, so often in the military, when someone says something, they might be retaliated. You don't complain to your, higher ups, because then they
Mhm.
could take it out on you. Well, now there are protections for that. And beyond those legislative changes, the Army also implemented something called the People First Task Force. And
Mhm.
it addresses any kind of toxic command at any of these bases and improves, or tries to improve, safety and justice. And then finally, there were some new protocols that the military told me that they were instilling, and that is to prioritize and investigate the cases of missing soldiers immediately, to give it more priority and to act quickly, because in Vanessa's case that didn't happen. The response initially was very, very slow to her disappearance. So I think in the end, it's pretty clear that has this solved all the problems? No. No, there are still many problems out there within the military, but it's very clear that Vanessa Guillén did not perish. She did not die in vain.
So, and I think that that answers my question where I was going to say, in your view, now it's been 5 years. Do you think that the changes are actually that they're implementing or actually fixing things or moving things along?
No, they were for a while. We'll see if they hold up. Things have changed in the military more recently, and there seems to be a shift away from diversity, inclusion, all of that stuff. How will it affect cases like sexual assault and harassment? One can only hope that no, that the act remains intact, and that these protocols will still be carried out.
hmm So you've already discussed a few things, but was there anything else that you may have uncovered that surprised you about Vanessa's case or other cases or even the DOD in general?
Uh, it just the family. I just love talking. I re-interviewed Myra
hmm
again. You'll hear my talk with her, and we will hear from our main reporter at the Pentagon, who will give us an update on what's happened since then. But Myra, who's now a new mom, and again considered running for political office, she's put it on hold for a little bit. You'll hear from her. You'll also hear how their mom, Gloria, was referred to as Mama Guillen. I don't know if you
Yes.
remember that. And I asked her why the media took put that title on her as a fierce protector, advocating for justice. Well, obviously, it's pretty obvious. She was so outspoken. And she said to me, you know why they call me Mama Guillen in all the newspapers and all the television interviews? Why? She said, it's because I am the mother of their daughters, because there is no mom like the one that defends your child. And she said, since I was a little girl, I was taught as a child that you are a mom when you have children, that you're a mom for your entire life. You never abandon a child, you fight for them. That's why they call me Mama Guillen. And it was very touching to me.
You make me cry. Oh my
I love her. I love her family. She was sick for a while. I hear her health is getting better. The youngest daughter, Lupe, who cried out with those impassioned chants, bring back my sister, bring her back alive. You hear her so repeatedly saying, "How could this happen on a military base?" She she was around the media so much. She did so many interviews that she was considering being a television reporter, a media reporter, a journalist.
Mhm.
At the last I heard, that she's in college. So there are updates that I think this podcast will give you, that you'll be happy to hear. There is a, a silver lining on this whole awful tragedy.
Yes. So I imagine as a journalist that there's a I guess there's like one or two cases that impact you for the rest of your life and every single case changes you. How did working on this project impact you as a journalist?
Well, it reminded me that in times of difficulty, and when we confront injustice, we have to speak up. That that's the true test of a person's character. That's why I do this TV show called What Would You Do, where we put hidden cameras, right? And we stage ethical and moral dilemmas, um, because it shows you a person's character, people who don't know they're on hidden camera. And that's what the character of the Guillen family, shine through.
Mhm.
Because true character is not what we do when everyone's watching. That's easy. It's what you do even when no one is watching. So that stuck with me, that just the commitment that this family has and continues to have to fight not only for their daughter, but for everyone else in the military. We have to remember that when Vanessa disappeared, it was around the time of the death of George Floyd in the summer of 2020.
Mhm.
And both occurred during that time when protesters were calling for more accountability from American institutions like law enforcement, like the military. That allowed it, again, to gain even more fire as it spread on social media. The power of social media really impressed me too. If it had not been for that, the family's commitment to keep chanting her name, then and social media to cover it the way to expose it the way they did, then I don't think they would have been able to get as much traction on it. And that's why we're doing the story. We want to remind the world that we have to speak up. Whenever we witness injustice, and not forget this beautiful young woman, Vanessa Guillen, who all she wanted to do was serve her country, who was at the top of her class in high school, who was a great athlete, and she just wanted to serve her country. Uh, I don't think we're doing this to make sure people don't forget who she was, and to look also at what has changed as a result of her story. And
Right.
we know that podcasts now, the podcast world will further honor Vanessa Guillen's memory.
Whenever I watch true crime, whenever I watch your shows,
Mm.
I'm always interested in knowing more about the victim. Like I always wish like I just knew more. If Vanessa were here today, what do you think that she would want people to remember most about her?
Oh, that she just wanted to do the right thing. That she had dreams like we all do. When I was a kid, I was a migrant farm worker. I dreamed of being a television reporter. She dreamed of being, just of serving her country, and then allowing that to to go to college because the military would pay for her college, and being able to help support her family, right? And get them out of that little house and maybe into, she wanted to provide for her family because they had so little money. That's what I think Vanessa would want us to remember, that immigrants, particularly, but all Americans, all we want is what's best for our families. And her way of doing it was by serving her country, and it allowed her to serve her family. That's all she wanted, and she was going to get married. She wanted to have babies. She wanted what everyone else has, and then this tragic thing happened. Um, I think she would want us to remember that, and to remember her mother and her sisters, and she would be incredibly proud of how they kept pushing for justice.
Well, John, thank you so much. Where can listeners find your podcast? It's kind of a silly question because they're listening to a podcast right now, but where do you want people to find you?
Wherever you get your podcasts, it's called Vanish: What Happened to Vanessa. And it's on right now. There'll be a new episode dropping every Tuesday. It's a new venture for me. I'm used to doing television. These are a lot of work, what you guys do on podcasts. And we dig so deep. You'll hear so much more than you had a chance to hear, even in our 2-hour documentaries on 2020. It's a great update on what's happened since then, because it's hard to believe, but it's been 5 years. So tune in wherever you get your podcasts.
Yes, tune in. Well, John, thank you so much for joining me today and for the work that you're doing to keep Vanessa's story alive. I mean, her case has affected me and it has affected all of my listeners. This case not only sparked outrage, it also sparked change, which is what we really needed.
Yeah.
And your podcast reminds us why Vanessa's life and her legacy still matters so deeply. For everyone listening, make sure you check out John's new podcast, Vanished: What Happened to Vanessa. It's available wherever you get your podcast, wherever you're listening right now, you can find it there. And honestly, you're not going to want to miss it. I've already listened to the first 4 episodes that are out, and there are interviews from people who saw her that day, from people who were expecting to see her that day, interviews that you haven't heard before. And if you're anything like me and you just want to know every single detail, check out the podcast. John, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Margot. It's a pleasure being with you.
Thank
Cuídate.
Shh, Mama's working on her podcast. I don't want to.